All right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining me today. The exciting moment for the top shaft. And so the top shaft is where we're going to get complaints of my 1-2 or my 3-4. It's jumping out of gear. It's not going in. I'm just getting grinding. A bunch of different scenarios there. After you've checked your cab mounts, your linkage adjustments, and things like that, is it still, and clutch, make sure that the clutch is releasing. Is it, you've determined that it's the top shaft. And so this is what it's going to look like. Kind of a interesting little part. So you got these little discs. Depending on your tractor, you might have a synchro for reverse right here as well, not just a simple collar. Depending on your tractor, you might have more plates than what you see here. Get a caliper, you mic the thickness of the plate of the disc, and then you also mic the thickness of the plate. There are two different specs there. Whatever model you're on, you get the book to give you them specs. If you need to replace them because visually that material is coming apart, it don't look good, it's too thin, then you take this snap ring, this bearing, and take the shaft apart that way to get to this side. You take this bearing, this gear, and take this drum off this way to get to this side. You do not pull this center hub unless you have to. There's 4 springs and balls behind it to give it its detent positioning, and it's a game of patience. It's nothing rocket science. It's just how do you get all 4 springs compressed with the balls on the end and then slide this collar over the top. That is the fun part if you take that off and you don't need to. Again, with bearings, let's just get them off safely. So like this one, we just take the snap ring off. We'll get him out. This one's really easy to just use the press to pull him off. And then we'll get the new bearings put on. Everything on this one passes inspection. So there's no reason. These are at brand new for this disc is 78. These are at 76. At 60, they're out of tolerance. I'm talking thousandths of an inch. So 78 thousandths is new thickness. These are at 76 thousandths. That is basically brand new. Basically brand new. So there's no reason whatsoever. I know I want to fix the tractor and do it right, but if I can save a couple $100 right here when things are still almost at brand new spec, I'm not going to do it. But we got new bearings. Determining bearings. So at first glance, that bearing might look pretty darn good to you, but if we zoom in or if the camera ever focuses, then we would see pitting in there. I'm waiting for it to zoom. It's not zooming. We can see if you wipe it, you can see little tiny pits, and I think you guys can start to see them there. Little tiny pits, and you can definitely see the color between the silver back here and the dull gray here. That color difference is a big indicator. A good bearing can have a little frosting to it, but when you start to see all that little pitting, throw it out. Ain't worth it. Unless you're just going to sell the tractor and you can sleep with yourself at night, throw it out, replace it, do it right. So we'll get these bearings knocked off. And so on your shifting column, this would be reverse, your low, or 1-2, and this is your high, your 3-4. And so yeah, so if you got, obviously then you got 3-4 problems, it's here, 1-2 problems here, reverse problems there. But that's the common one with problems. The bottom shafts, they're a heck of an engineered transmission. The bottom shaft is usually from people trying to shift too hard on the go, where they're just grinding from A, B, C, D. But if you stop, shift, and then take off, that bottom shaft will last your life and your kids' life. So let's get these bearings swapped and get this guy installed. So we got the top shaft in. That's what we look like when it's back together. You have your oil pump bolted on because the oil pump is the retainer for the bearing. So that's normally bolted on. I took it off because we're ready to put the diff in. But we got our, preload, did the shim just like we did on these other ones to get the right end play. So we talked about these little discs. So what happens now is when this cup goes to shift gear, so right now we're in low range. Here's our neutral safety switch that if you ever go to hit your key and the tractor don't quite start, these are the 2 wires that you would investigate. So there's neutral. So let's say we're going to shift to low. As this drum tries to push, it's breaking them gears in there, and it's trying to get this drum to match the speed, to get the gear to match the speed to the hub. That's why it's called a synchro shift versus the collar shift. When you go to shift, it's just going to grind until it can slide over. There's nothing there. These are to help match the speeds. So he's in. When you're putting the top shaft in, the bearing and the A gear kind of argue a little bit. So you might, don't be scared to kind of push a little bit and kind of irk and get it to get in there. And then, yeah, so pretty straightforward, pretty simple, not a whole lot going on there, but just investigate them synchros while you're there. And when you have a top shaft problem, we just got to diagnose it properly. There is a bolt here that you saw that move around. There's a bolt here that holds that in place. Now it's time for the differential. So we take our pump back off, or I do, take the pump off. But while we're here, let's take a second and talk 3-point. So there's your load control shaft that runs through there. And this arm has to go on your differential, and it gets set down in at the same time. But when you're doing the load control shaft, you want to be very careful, and that's why I tell people you can shine a flashlight through this bore, and you're looking for this, because if you push that load control shaft through, that shaft sits between here. If you break this pin off, which happens once in a while, then you got to pull your cab, pull your axles, pull the differential, pull this out, put this pin in, put it all back together, because that you lose your 3-point control, and it sucks. So that's to be careful. So the differential, we've already done put the differential in, measure our side play, count our shims, get ourselves to that 2 to 3 thousandths preload, not end play. So you're 2 thousandths negative end play. So now we'll lower him in with the arm and put our bearing caps on. And remember, on this cap, if we have diff lock, make sure that these snap rings are in good condition and that you time this bearing quill accordingly. And so, yep. So we'll start setting that stuff down, get him torqued in and set, and next we will rebuild axles. So that went down pretty good. My arms are long enough I can hold this finger on top of the cast and reach the handle of the cherry picker and let it go down. But you can see how high I still am with the differential. So about here, I'm going to see if I can't get them bolts in. Right there, that one. And them two. Because with the differential high, it gives me more room to reach in with the wrench. But you can still reach in through this port here. If you had to, you can reach in through the rear end. But with the long extensions and a swivel, with the differential a little high, it works out good. Our special tool number 4, that's SS tool number 4, just a piece of some 1/4 inch flat with a hole drilled in it and a bearing cup from one of the shafts with just a little kink to help level it out. Price was right. So I'll get them 3 bolts in. I personally, any bolt here, I lock tight. All these bolts lock tight. Get your tech manual because it's going to have all your specs. But yeah, so all right. That bottom one there is kind of a tricky little one to get to. You almost gotta as the bolt gets down further, it gets better. But yeah, so we'll get it down there, and then we'll double check that everything's still in place, and then torque them, hit them with the torque wrench, and then that's done. Then we'll finish lowering the differential and put our caps on. And then I know I teased you with some axle stuff, but we'll get there. We're getting there. These housings will fight you going in. I use a long bolt, then it's orientated before you try going in. And if you get it square, then you kind of just tap it in kind of deal, and you're done. Nice and simple. All right, so now you got it all back together, and now you have to check your backlash. So you put your transmission in the park, and you're trying to feel the clearance between the ring gear and the pinion. And I have 0. I don't even need to look at the dial indicator. I can feel that there's absolutely 0 backlash. We're actually tight. So what I need to do is take a couple shims out of this side and move over to this side, and then tighten everything back up and do it again. And it's important to torque these up because you want to make sure you get that proper crush on the shim stack. You don't want to just kind of like snug it up a little bit, you know, with just 2 bolts. You want to install it so you get consistent crush on them shims. And so, yeah, let the fun continue. To kind of save a little bit of time on guessing at shims, I put the dial indicator here, and I brought it out 5 thousandths because I might have a 5,000 shim, and that gives me that tick, 7 to 15 thousandths backlash, and that would be about that. So I'll pull this off, see if I got a 5,000 shim, flop sides, and that should get me darn close. There we go. We got it installed, and at about 10 thousandths backlash roughly. You got to be careful because even though you're in park, the pinion is going to rotate a little bit, so you're just kind of feeling the tick, tick, tick. And then, so that wraps that up. So now we can retorque everything. We can get our line in for our differential lock. We can get that line in, and then the O-rings and backup rings for the brake pistons. And then I promise we'll get to axles.